Okay.
Hi, everyone. It's Laurie and Jennie here for another of the MoonLore series where we talk about each month, we talk about the new moon and the full moon. So today's video is about the full moon, which occurs on September 2nd at what time, Jennie?
Oh, it's very early in the morning, 1:22 a.m. Eastern Standard
1:22
Time.
a.m. So
Yeah.
if you are on the other coast, if you're in Pacific time, it's going to have happened on the 1st of September, late at night. So, but we're looking at it over here on the East Coast. So one way that we always talk about this, there's a few things. We want to show you how to work with this in your own chart, how to see where these lunations occur in your own chart. Of course, the new moon is always the time to plant a seed or begin something. And Jennie will talk to you a little bit about what began in her life that she had no control over. You know, sometimes we consciously plant a seed. Sometimes a seed can get dropped out of the sky and fall right into our lives. So at any rate, whatever happened 2 weeks ago on the new moon, which was on August 18th, now for this full moon comes into full view, full illumination. So do you want to open up that chart, Jennie, or is there something you wanted to say first?
Yeah, no, let's take a look at this chart. It's a interesting chart. It's a funny chart. And we've been kind of wrangling around a little bit with it.
Yeah,
yeah. And I think the reason I'll say that is just because there's, it's just the moon is in Pisces, which is pretty incongruent to so much of what we're dealing with right now. I mean, we've been dealing with this Capricorn, heavy-handed, earthy, it's deep and dark, and it's like being under the mountain a little bit, and then you throw in the Mars and Aries. Now we've thrown in some fire, so we're like very elementally, we're earth and fire and these massive forces in play in society and with the climate and these different things. And then you have this Pisces moon. It's this watery, more ethereal energy. So it's a little bit of a head scratcher when you're first looking at it. And then Laurie's got the sun in Virgo. So it's not this immediate thing that's apparent. But what you can probably already tell by looking is you can see that the moon is in the middle of those two things, the Mars and Aries and the COVID cluster of those three planets in Capricorn. Oh.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's so clearly right there in the middle. So what is the moon doing? What is it bringing forth? These planets are in a square pattern to each other. This is because Mars is getting ready to go retrograde within a few days or a week after that. And it's going to go back and forth and square those planets. So Pisces, that moon in Pisces right now, it's offering us what? An opportunity to dream, an opportunity to notice that we have our head in the sand, that we're not, and another thought that I have is simply we might need a break.
Yeah.
And in some ways this moon in Pisces gives us a chance to take a breather and look at what's a little less tangible and hard. What do you think, Jennie?
Well, also as you're talking too, it's, you do see that the moon is up there. It's not that far away from Neptune. It's a little bit out of orb to straight up call it a conjunction. But nonetheless, there's a little bit of an enforcement of that Pisces energy with Neptune being in its own sign of Pisces. But I think all those things it's the dreaminess, or there's an elusive part of Pisces, but there's also the part about developing compassion and seeing how we're all interconnected. There's all those pieces, and we're all collectively, I think, reeling from all these things that are happening. And I know in the United States, there's even more enhancement with, the things that are going on politically right now. There's just so much going on that we're all kind of going into overwhelm. And certainly Moon in Pisces is an overwhelm type of setup or suggestion. But then even then, as we're talking about all that, it's like, but you can't forget about the Sun in Virgo, which brings this other, and Virgo's the opposite of that Pisces. Virgo's the minutia and the detail oriented and the roll up your sleeves and work on it, right?
Yeah. And there was something you said that made me think, this is an opportunity for us to really develop compassion for what we're right in the middle of.
Mm-hmm.
We're right in the middle of this, and Virgo is so much about service, and Pisces is so much about compassion, that this seems like a difficult pattern going on here, but it might just mean that it's an opportunity for us to pause in the midst of this battle and see where we can offer compassion and service to those around us, to those that need it.
Yeah, and I that's great, Laurie. And I think that also is enhanced by the other piece of the puzzle here, which is the Moon is in an exact sextile with Uranus.
I love that.
And the Sun is in an exact trine with Uranus. So what that brings to it is what you just said, in the name of this awakening that is happening, that must happen. And I can't help it, I always just think of the Uranus and Taurus again. It's the Mother Earth systems, the ecosystem, the systems that we are naturally attuned to, and we've lost our way with that natural attunement, and we are being asked to reattune to this natural heritage of that connection, and to help each other, and all those pieces that you said about the service and the compassion. And the other thing you said earlier, Laurie, was this idea that, well, what if Moon in Pisces represents the dream that we're all kind of like just almost like not dealing with reality, but the dream itself is what wakes us up. It's a powerful message. Of just going into those softer places of helping others, but also there's a sense of sacrifice with the Pisces Moon.
Yes, very good.
Yeah. So it's
I that's really, it's so funny because Jenny and I have been talking about this for a while and looking at it, and now it's suddenly that whole issue of compassion and kindness and service, and how that is being awakened by that Uranus. I think that's really a big piece of what this is speaking to. We cannot change, on an individual level. We can do what we can do. We can be compassionate and we can be of service, but we cannot stop this incredibly powerful machine that is running its course right now. But what we can do, and what we need to, there's so much, I see so many people so discouraged and so, overwhelmed with all this hard stuff going on. What can we do? And we all tend to, it's easy to think, well, I can't do anything, and then just go into discouragement and depression. Well, yes, there is something we can do, and wake up to what that is. And that is a more, doing the day-to-day routines of taking care of each other, of being compassionate, and showing up in those ways. If we go at it by trying to fight against all this, we're going to just get more and more disillusioned and fall into the trap of alcohol, or that harder stuff of Pisces.
Shadow. Yeah.
So for this full moon, okay, have a glass of champagne if you want, a glass of wine, but be careful to not fall into just those intangible levels of suffering that Pisces can bring. Allow that excitement and wake up energy, because, you know, Uranus is very active. And next year in 2021, Uranus and Saturn are going to square each other. And in my view, when Uranus and Saturn come up against each other, Uranus always wins. And Uranus is the future, and Uranus is awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what continues to give me hope in the midst of this. And I think that is what Uranus is telling us in the midst of this incredibly difficult time, that there is hope. And all what we can do right now is to be of service and to develop compassion and all of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, some of the other things you're making me think of, Laurie, too, is just one of the things we can learn from astrology is in a chart like this, you can see the bigger outer planets. So the Uranus we're looking at in Taurus, Pluto, Neptune, and to pretty good degree Saturn, I would argue, too. And then you see the quick movement of the moon. So in other words, there's these big elemental forces moving, and each of us have our own individual stories impacted by those larger forces. And so for each of us, we are very much part and parcel of that, but we have to find our own way. And the astrology symbolism, sun, moon, you know, Mercury, Venus, Mars, they can help us find our way in that bigger story. And that's kind of what we're looking at. So you see these big elemental forces that we have no control over. The Pisces moon is saying, hey, you have to surrender to some of that. Right. And then, but at the same time, the Virgo sun is saying, but you can do these things in your life. You can take these steps, these tangible steps. Yeah. So
that's fascinating. Yeah. It's really, it's so interesting. It does start coming alive once we start really talking about it. So, yeah. You know, for those of you who are watching this, you want to think about 2 weeks ago, August 18th was the new moon. I'm sorry, Jenny, I bet you've got it there. Do you know, where was that new moon exactly? What was the?
Oh, it was at 26 Leo.
So it was actually before the sun had moved into Virgo. It was at the end of Leo. So you want to look at the house in your chart that holds Leo and consider what it was. You know, what did you plant that seed? If you did your new moon ritual that we always encourage you to do, what was the seed that you planted for that new moon? And how do you see it now opening up and seeing how it's unfolded? And the unfoldment would now be in the house that holds Pisces. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, okay. That's interesting. I'm going to just give you a tiny bit on, for me, the seed was planted in the 12th house. So, and the seed for me was very much, I think that was the day I first met with my writing coach to decide about this book I'm writing. And now the full moon is happening in my 7th house, where I'm really starting to do the writing, and I'm doing it for others. I don't know. That's not a great example, but I haven't really thought it through until just, I'll give that a little more thought. What about you, Jenny? How's this unfolding for you? I kind of mentioned it.
Well, I was just going to just pipe in for you there. I think it makes sense. I mean, sometimes if you overanalyze, but just the simple idea, you planted a new seed, you got to work on it, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're already seeing the first illumination of, boy, where should I point that arrow as you're writing the book? So
right now, when we're making this video, is a couple of days ahead of this full moon, or is it tomorrow? Whatever, a day or two ahead. But already, actually, the full moon, when I think about that full moon being in the 7th house, what that makes me think of is that survey I sent out yesterday. And now I have all these, this information from my people. Yeah. My people, you know, when it comes to relationship, 7th house being relationship, which is where the full moon is falling for me because I've got Pisces in my 7th house. You know, it's not always just our intimate partners. It's the people who we interact with. And I definitely see in my life, the seventh house is more my clients. In many, many ways, it speaks to my clients and my connections with my clients. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. What about you, Jenny?
Oh, well,
You didn't intend to plant the seed.
no, basically the short version here is just that my family home burned down in the California wildfires that belonged to my parents. On the day of the new moon, the fire started. The next day it had spread, and by the third day, their house and everybody's house in that area had burned to the ground. So that talk about elemental forces and just things being totally beyond your control. So for this full moon, it's the very first stages of where can I find housing for my parents. It's that immediate, like, looking at, an apartment, to something really basic, just to get through this crazy, where they got caught in the crosshairs of climate change, of inaction on the government, federal government level, to help in those fires that possibly could have changed the outcome. It's all these things. And really that sense of just surrendering to the loss and the major changes happening. So that's kind of what's being shown up. And the Sun in Virgo, I think for me, is just okay, well, I gotta roll up my sleeves. I gotta go help, sort through some things, just provide some service, and just, do the minutia of all of the logistics that now have to happen while dealing with the Pisces loss feeling, the intangible and a large amount of grief associated with all that.
Yeah, that suffering of Pisces. Yeah. And really, I think, that full illumination of what happened. Obviously there's a lot of more complex things going on in your chart, but this is one little sliver of a way to look at it, because it did happen so much right on that new moon. And now, you probably were in so much shock to begin with, and now you're really seeing the depth of what that means.
Yeah, and the new moon for me was actually very much like this chart. This chart very much lines up with my personal chart that we're seeing right now, this East Coast with the ascendant there, 12 degrees of Cancer. So for me, that Leo moon is in the second house of possessions, value, so tangible goods, like some seed being planted. And then now having the full moon be the third house, dealing the sun being in the third house, logistics and communicating and all of these very mercurial things that are not the emotional piece of it, and also my sibling being involved, which also is a third house designation. And then the moon, the sacrifice, the ninth house, the higher education, the learning to let go, all of those things showing up in the ninth house
and the travel. You're going to be getting on a plane and heading out there within the next couple of days or so as well. So
even with the COVID cluster. Anyway, so that's just a chapter in the personal life.
And I just have to say, I have to give a shout out to Ann Ortley, because I think she's the one that called that gathering of planets in Capricorn the COVID cluster, and it's so perfect. I think she's the one that came up with it. I don't know. At any rate, it's interesting to watch these things. One other thing I want to bring in as well, other than saying, Jesus, Jenny, I'm so sorry you're having to go through this. What a craziness. But the other thing, in looking at the longer cycle, the bigger cycle, yes, we want to look at the new moon on August 18th, and we've been talking about that. But the larger cycle that the full moon points to is the new moon in Pisces, which happened on February 23rd. Mm-hmm. So if you've got any idea, any view in your mind of what was going on then, what was the seed, the longer term seed that you planted in February. I think, as we go forward in doing these videos, Jenny, I think we should get a little more, I'm assuming you're as disorganized as I am, but it would be really good for us, because I'm sure there would be times when this would be extremely relevant, but I don't keep notes, you know, going back. It would be great to be able to look at it and say, oh, you know, what was that new moon in Pisces on February 23rd? I have a vague memory of it because it was my mother's birthday. It was February 23rd. But I don't remember like what I was thinking, what the seed was I was planting. But I think we should start keeping track of that.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, I was just going to say, I think that just in the collective, like in the US, I mean, that was certainly the beginning of like, you know, there's like this disease coming across and, you know, and people were, it was starting to blow up in Europe, and that was the beginning of that, for sure, like this, you know, and back then it seemed kind of like, oh, that's somebody else's problem over there. And that was just the beginning of, and Pisces, the other thing about Pisces is that there's no boundaries. Pisces. So it was this like confluence of, that might seem like it's somebody else's disease, but it's actually become ours. And I also know on a personal level, I know exactly where I was in that time. I was on a group trip with a great group of friends down to New Orleans. And that was sort of like, so now I think of that as this, it was like that last piece of just this really fun trip, like with good companions, and we had a great time. And when we came back from that trip, it was when things really started to go crazy and change. So I have it's this memory of this community that still exists, but it has been transformed since then. So
isn't that interesting? Yeah, that's right. Because it was the very beginning of March that things really started closing down, and that's so interesting. And now the full illumination of what began then, we can see what is it now? 160 or 180,000 people have died in this country. That's a lot of Pisces suffering.
Yep. And there's a lot of lying going on about it too, is the other thing. There's a lot of, you know, hiding and changing the truth. A lot of misinformation. There's a lot of just misunderstanding. So,
Not
and on we could go.
We could go on and on, but I think we should wrap this up. And happy full moon to all of you. And we will see you at the new moon. Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you.